The mafia boss mocked the young dancer, saying he'd marry her if she danced that tango. But what happened in the end left everyone speechless. Wherever you are in life, this is your sign to keep going. Like plus subscribe for daily courage. The Grand Bellini Hotel ballroom glittered with wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, where the city's elite mingled in designer evening wear. Emma Sullivan moved through this world like a ghost, invisible despite her perfectly pressed red apron over a crisp white shirt. At 26, she had mastered the art of serving champagne without being seen. More champagne, miss? A silver-haired gentleman nodded without looking at her. Nobody ever did. Emma filled his glass precisely 3/4 full, as instructed, and continued her circuit. 6 more hours, and she could collect her pay. 6 more hours of smiling politely while being treated like furniture. That's when she noticed him. He sat at the center table surrounded by men who leaned toward him with desperate eagerness. Unlike them, he reclined in his chair with casual dominance. His black hair was slicked back, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass, partially covered by perfectly maintained stubble. His white shirt opened just enough to reveal a gold chain against his tanned skin. But it was his eyes that made Emma falter, dark and predatory. They scanned the room with casual ownership. Antonio Romano. Even working-class nobodies like her knew that name. "That's Don Romano," whispered Javier, another server. "Controls half the city's underground. They say he owns every judge from here to the state line." "I know who he is," Emma replied, tearing her gaze away. Everyone knew the Romano family name. Their legitimate businesses were merely the public face of an empire built on things whispered about but never discussed. The night progressed predictably until the orchestra began playing after dinner. Couples took to the dance floor, and Emma took advantage of the distraction to rest her feet behind a marble column. "You look bored." The voice, low and smooth like aged whiskey, made her jump. Don Romano stood before her, hands casually in his pockets, his imposing presence making the spacious ballroom feel claustrophobic. I'm working, sir," she managed, straightening immediately. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You've been watching me all night." It wasn't a question, and denial would be pointless. "I apologize if I was staring. Why were you watching me?" He stepped closer, trapping her between his body and the column. Not touching her, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly masculine. "I wasn't—" "Don't lie to me." There was no menace in his voice, just absolute certainty that he would get what he wanted. "Everyone in this room wants something from me. What do you want?" Emma met his gaze directly. "Nothing, Mr. Romano. I'm just here to serve drinks." Something flickered in his eyes, surprised that she hadn't cowered. "Your name?" "Emma Sullivan." He nodded slowly. "You move differently than the other servers, like you're dancing even when standing still." Before she could respond, a man in an expensive suit approached. "Don Romano, the mayor is asking for you." Antonio's eyes remained fixed on hers for another beat before he nodded. "We'll continue this conversation, Emma Sullivan." It sounded like a promise, or a threat. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. As midnight approached, the orchestra shifted to more passionate pieces. Several couples performed an impressive tango, drawing applause from the crowd. Don Romano stood surrounded by admirers, champagne in hand, watching the dancers with an inscrutable expression. As Emma passed with her tray, his voice cut through the music. "You." The room fell silent, every eye turning toward her. Emma froze, champagne flutes trembling slightly on her tray. "Me?" she asked, though she knew perfectly well he meant her. Antonio Romano smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've been serving drinks all night to the most powerful people in this city. You've overheard their secrets, seen their indiscretions." He stepped forward, taking a glass from her tray and raising it. "What do you think of us, I wonder?" Emma felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. The catering manager made a frantic cutting motion across his throat, silently begging her not to speak. "I think," she said carefully, "that I'm just here to do a job, sir." Antonio's smile widened. A diplomatic answer. He turned to address the crowd. "She's been invisible all night, yet she's seen everything. The perfect spy among us." Light laughter followed his words. "Tell me, Emma Sullivan, do you dance as gracefully as you serve drinks?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm working. I'm offering you a break." He extended his hand. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a path to the dance floor. "One dance," Antonio interrupted, his voice carrying throughout the now silent ballroom. "If you dance this tango with me, I'll marry you right here in front of everyone." Gasps and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Emma felt her cheeks burning. He was mocking her, turning her into entertainment for his wealthy friends. The Don's eyes glittered with challenge. "Unless you're afraid." Something snapped inside her. 6 years of hiding, of being invisible, of burying who she truly was, all of it crystallized into a single moment of defiance. "Fine," she said, handing her tray to a stunned Javier. "One dance." The crowd murmured in surprise as she removed her apron. Antonio led her to the center of the floor. The orchestra began playing a dramatic tango as he placed his hand on her waist. "Don't worry," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Just follow my lead." Emma looked up at him, a smile playing at her lips. "I'll try to keep up." The music built, and Antonio led her into the first steps. His confidence was evident in every move, his body guiding hers with practiced authority. For the first few measures, she followed dutifully, letting him believe he was in control. Then the violin soared into the main theme, and Emma transformed. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She matched his steps perfectly, then added flourishes of her own, her feet moving with lightning precision. She felt his momentary surprise as she took command of the dance. Antonio recovered quickly, rising to her challenge, their bodies engaged in a battle for dominance as old as the dance itself. When he lifted her, she extended into a perfect arch that drew audible gasps. When he led her through a complex sequence, she followed flawlessly, then countered with movements that forced him to adapt. The dance became a conversation, a negotiation, a struggle for power. As the final notes approached, Antonio spun her away, then pulled her back against his chest. Their faces inches apart, both breathing heavily, they held the final pose as the music crashed to its conclusion. Silence hung in the air for 3 heartbeats. Then, the room erupted. Applause thundered against the high ceiling. Women wiped tears from their eyes. Men stood, clapping with genuine appreciation. Antonio still held her close, his eyes searching hers with newfound respect. "Who are you?" he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. Before she could answer, an elderly man pushed through the crowd. His weathered face was streaked with tears as he approached them. "I knew it," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "The moment I saw you dance, you're Marguerite Sullivan's daughter." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. She stepped away from Antonio, whose arms fell limply to his sides. "You're mistaken," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. No, the old man continued. "I would recognize that style anywhere. I was your mother's accompanist for 15 years at the National Ballet. You have her exact same flourish in the 3rd position." The whispers started immediately. "Marguerite Sullivan? The famous prima ballerina? Didn't she die in that terrible accident?" Emma felt her carefully constructed world collapsing. She glanced at Antonio, whose expression had transformed from confusion to intrigue. "I need to get back to work," she said weakly. "Is it true?" Antonio asked quietly, holding her gaze. "Yes," she admitted. "Marguerite Sullivan was my mother." The old pianist clasped his hands together. My dear, you were following in her footsteps. You were accepted to the Royal Academy before. His voice trailed off. Before she died, Emma finished flatly. And I gave it all up. Now with that, she turned and walked through the crowd, pushing past guests who reached out to touch her as if her mother's fame might rub off on them. She didn't stop until she reached the staff locker room, where she collapsed onto a bench, hands shaking violently. The door swung open. Antonio Romano stood in the doorway, his imposing figure blocking the exit. "Get out," she said, not looking up. He didn't move. "You made me look like a fool out there." "That wasn't my intention." "No?" He stepped inside. "You deliberately hid your abilities until you could humiliate me in front of the entire city." Emma laughed bitterly. "Your ego is remarkable. I wasn't thinking about you at all. You're the one who forced me onto that dance floor." "To offer you a moment of glory," he countered. "To elevate you from servant to partner. By mockingly proposing marriage?" She stood, anger overcoming fear. "You were using me for entertainment." Antonio's jaw tightened. "I was offering you respect." "No, you were exerting power. There's a difference." She grabbed her coat. "Now please move. I'd like to leave with what remains of my dignity." He didn't budge. "Why did you stop dancing?" The question caught her off guard. "That's none of your business. You have an extraordinary gift." "Had," she corrected. "Now I serve drinks to pay rent." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Because of your mother's death?" Emma felt tears threatening. "Move. Now." For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then surprisingly, he stepped aside. As she brushed past him, his hand caught her wrist, not roughly, but with enough pressure to stop her. "I meant what I said out there." "What, the marriage proposal?" She tried to inject sarcasm into her voice, but it came out breathless instead. His dark eyes held hers, suddenly serious. "I'm a man of my word, Emma Sullivan. When I make a promise, I keep it." She pulled her arm free. "It wasn't a promise. It was a joke at my expense." "It stopped being a joke the moment you began to dance." Emma collapsed onto her worn sofa, still wearing her work uniform, too exhausted to change. Her tiny apartment felt even smaller tonight, the walls closing in as memories she'd suppressed for years came flooding back. The applause, her mother's smile in the spotlight, the endless hours at the bar, the acceptance letter from the Royal Academy that had arrived 3 days before the accident. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello?" She answered cautiously. "Emma Sullivan." His voice was unmistakable, even through the phone. She sat up straight. "How did you get my number?" "I can get anything I want in this city." The arrogance in his tone made her clench her teeth. "What do you want, Mr. Romano?" "Antonio," he corrected. "And I want to talk about what happened tonight." Emma sighed, rubbing her temple. "There's nothing to discuss. You humiliated me, I surprised you, an old man recognized me. End of story." "I'd like to make amends." "Not necessary." "I disagree." Something in his voice shifted. "Have dinner with me tomorrow." Emma laughed despite herself. "I'm not having dinner with you." "Why not?" "Because I know who you are." A pause. "And who am I exactly?" "Don Romano," she said, infusing the title with all the contempt she could muster. "The man who controls half the city through fear. The man whose name makes people cross the street. The man whose rivals have a habit of disappearing." Another pause, longer this time. "Is that all I am to you?" The vulnerability in the question caught her off guard. "It's all I need to know." "Let me prove you wrong. One dinner." "No. I'll double whatever you would have made tonight." Emma felt anger flare in her chest. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" "Nothing from you." She could almost hear him thinking, recalibrating his approach. Men like him weren't used to rejection. What if I donate $10,000 to the youth ballet program at the community center? His voice was calm, matter of fact. Emma froze. How do you know about that? I know everything that happens in my city. The program is struggling. They need new bars, better flooring, scholarship money. She gripped the phone tighter. So now you're using charity as leverage? I'm offering a mutually beneficial arrangement. The children get resources. I get dinner with you. Emma closed her eyes, thinking of the kids she occasionally volunteered with at the center. Many had extraordinary talent but no means to develop it. $10,000 would transform that program. 20,000, she countered, surprising herself. A low chuckle came through the phone. Done. And I choose the restaurant. Of course. And it's just dinner, nothing more. Just dinner, he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he didn't believe it would end there. Fine. Tomorrow at 7. Mario's Trattoria on 9th Street. The next morning, Emma received a large envelope by courier. Inside, a cashier's check for $20,000 made out to the community center's ballet program, along with transfer paperwork already completed. Attached was a note on heavy cardstock. I keep my promises. A.R. Emma stared at the check, her hands trembling slightly. He'd come through before their dinner even happened, with no guarantee she wouldn't back out. It was either supreme confidence or surprising honor. She wasn't sure which unsettled her more. That evening, she found herself spending more time than usual preparing. She told herself it was because she refused to appear intimidated, not because she cared what Antonio Romano thought of her appearance. She chose a simple black dress that she'd worn to a friend's wedding. Elegant, but not trying too hard. Mario's was busy when she arrived, exactly at 7. The owner, an elderly Italian man who knew her as an occasional customer, greeted her warmly. Your friend, he come early, Mario said with a wink. Very generous tip to give you the corner table. Very handsome man. Emma followed Mario through the restaurant. Antonio Romano sat at a corner table, his powerful frame making the simple wooden chair look like a throne. He stood when he saw her, eyes taking in her appearance with naked appreciation. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said as she took her seat. I keep my promises too. She placed her purse on the table. I signed the papers. The money is being transferred to the program. Antonio nodded, seeming pleased. I'm glad. Why did you send it before dinner? I could have stood you up. He shrugged one broad shoulder. It wasn't a transaction. It was a gesture of good faith. The waiter appeared with a bottle of wine that Antonio must have ordered in advance. After it was poured and they'd ordered food, an awkward silence fell. So, Emma said finally, what exactly do you want from me, Mr. Romano? Antonio, he corrected again. And I want to know your story. My story? How the daughter of Marguerite Sullivan ends up serving drinks at society events. Emma took a large sip of wine. It's not complicated. My mother died. I stopped dancing. Why? Because I couldn't. She looked down at her glass. After the accident, I tried. But the music started and I froze. The passion was gone. Until last night, he observed quietly. She met his gaze. Last night was different. You made me angry. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. So anger brought back what grief took away. Something like that. What happened to your father? Left when I was 3. It was always just me and my mother. Emma was surprised at herself for sharing even this much. Your turn. Tell me something real about the great Don Romano. Antonio leaned back, studying her. Few people had the courage to ask him direct questions. What would you like to know? Something true, not the rumors or reputation. He considered her request seriously. I was born into this life. My father was Don before me. I was being groomed for leadership before I could tie my shoes. And did you want it? This life? Antonio's expression darkened momentarily. Want doesn't enter into it. It's duty, family, Legacy. That's not an answer. His eyes narrowed slightly, but there was respect in them, not anger. No, it's not. He took a drink of wine. When I was 17, I wanted to be an architect. Design buildings that would last centuries. The admission surprised her. What happened? My older brother was supposed to take over the family. He was killed. I became the heir. His tone was matter of fact, but Emma sensed old pain beneath the surface. I'm sorry. Antonio looked genuinely startled by her sympathy. It was a long time ago. Their food arrived, simple Italian fare that seemed at odds with the powerful man consuming it. Emma found herself relaxing slightly as they ate, the conversation flowing more naturally. You're very good at this, she observed after a while. At what? Acting normal, charming, making me forget who you really are. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. And who am I really? A dangerous man. She held his gaze. The kind who gets what he wants through fear. Antonio put his fork down carefully. Is that what you think I'm doing with you? Using fear? No, she admitted. That's what's confusing me. Before he could answer, the restaurant door burst open. 3 men in expensive suits entered, scanning the room before spotting Antonio. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, approached their table with purposeful strides. Don Romano, he said, his voice respectful but urgent. Forgive the interruption. There's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Antonio's expression changed instantly, warmth vanishing, replaced by cold authority. I'm in the middle of dinner, Vito. It's the Calabrese matter, sir. It can't wait. Emma watched the transformation with fascination. Gone was the man who'd spoken of youthful dreams of architecture, replaced by someone who radiated such quiet menace that nearby diners instinctively leaned away. Wait outside, Antonio ordered. The men immediately complied, exiting without another word. He turned back to Emma, his expression softening slightly. I apologize, but I need to handle this. She nodded, reminded abruptly of the reality of who he was. Of course. Antonio hesitated, clearly torn between duty and desire. I'd like to see you again. I don't think that's a good idea. Because of who I am? Yes. He nodded, accepting her answer with surprising grace. He placed several large bills on the table. Thank you for your honesty. He stood, buttoning his jacket. And for the dance. As he walked away, Emma felt a strange hollowness in her chest. She'd gotten exactly what she'd wanted. Dinner over quickly, no complications, no entanglements with a dangerous man. So why did it feel like loss? The next morning, Emma reported for her regular shift at Cafe Luna, a small coffee shop 10 blocks from her apartment. The morning rush kept her busy, mind occupied with orders instead of dark eyes and unexpected vulnerability. By noon, the crowd had thinned, and she was wiping down tables when the door chimed. Antonio Romano stood in the doorway, as out of place in the humble cafe as a wolf in a petting zoo. His black suit was impeccably tailored, gold watch glinting at his wrist. Every customer turned to stare. He approached the counter where Emma stood frozen, coffee pot in hand. Good afternoon, he said, as if his presence in a neighborhood coffee shop wasn't extraordinary. What are you doing here? She asked quietly. Getting coffee. His mouth quirked in amusement. This is a cafe, isn't it? How did you know where I work? I told you. I can find out anything in this city. He glanced at the menu. What do you recommend? Emma set the coffee pot down carefully. The Americano is good. 1 Americano, then. He placed a 20 on the counter. And whatever anyone else in here wants. On me. The cafe patrons whispered among themselves. Emma felt her manager's curious gaze burning into her back as she prepared his coffee. When she handed it to him, he didn't immediately take it. Our dinner was interrupted. I'd like a rain check. I told you, I don't think it's a good idea. Because of my business? Yes. Antonio leaned slightly closer. What if I told you I'm considering a change in business models? Emma raised an eyebrow skeptically. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking about legacy, about building things that last, not just controlling them. His voice dropped lower. You made me remember something I'd forgotten. One dance didn't change who you are. No, he agreed. But it reminded me of who I wanted to be. Emma felt her resolve wavering. There was sincerity in his eyes that seemed impossible to fake. I can't, she said finally. Your world is too dangerous. Then let me into yours. He gestured around the cafe. This world. Coffee, normal conversations. No interruptions from men named Vito. Despite herself, Emma smiled. You wouldn't last a day in normal life. Try me. He took the coffee from her hand, their fingers brushing briefly. I'm a fast learner. Before she could respond, the cafe door opened again. The pianist from the gala, the one who'd recognized her, entered, his elderly face lighting up when he saw her. Miss Sullivan, I've been looking everywhere for you. He hurried over, clutching a folder to his chest. I had to find you. It's about your mother's legacy. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Antonio stepped slightly closer to her side, his presence oddly reassuring. Mr. Antonio addressed the old man. Abernathy, William Abernathy. He looked between them curiously. I was Marguerite's accompanist for years. Mr. Abernathy, Antonio continued smoothly. Perhaps this conversation would be better in private. Emma's shift ends soon, doesn't it? He looked at her questioningly. In an hour, she confirmed, grateful for his intervention despite herself. Perfect. I'll arrange a private room at Bellini's for lunch at 1:30. Would that be acceptable to both of you? Mr. Abernathy nodded eagerly. Most generous. I have so much to share with you, my dear. Photographs, programs, reviews. I've kept everything. Emma felt overwhelmed but managed a nod. I'll be there. After Mr. Abernathy left, bubbling with excitement, Antonio turned back to her. I hope you don't mind my interference. He seemed determined to have this conversation regardless of setting. Why are you helping me? Emma asked bluntly. Antonio took a sip of his coffee. Perhaps I'm trying to prove I can be part of your normal world. By arranging private rooms at luxury hotels? He smiled. Baby steps. Despite everything, Emma found herself smiling back. This doesn't change anything. I still think seeing you is a bad idea. Then consider lunch a professional courtesy. I'll make sure you and Mr. Abernathy have privacy. I won't intrude. He stepped back, raising his coffee cup slightly. Excellent recommendation, by the way. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. Antonio. He paused, looking back. Thank you. For the donation to the ballet program, the kids will benefit enormously. His expression softened. Children should have the chance to follow their passions. Not everyone gets that opportunity. The simple statement, loaded with personal regret, stayed with Emma long after he'd gone. The private dining room at the Bellini Hotel was intimate, but not imposingly luxurious. Someone had carefully selected a space that wouldn't overwhelm. Mr. Abernathy was already seated when Emma arrived, his weathered hands arranging photographs on the white tablecloth with reverent care. Ms. Sullivan, come, please. He gestured eagerly to the chair beside him. I have so much to share with you. Emma sat, bracing herself for the pain of seeing her mother's face. A discreet server appeared immediately with water and menus before vanishing again. I wasn't sure you'd come, Mr. Abernathy said. Your reaction at the gala suggested this might be difficult for you. Emma nodded, appreciating his perception. I haven't talked about my mother in years. May I ask why? She was extraordinary. Emma took a steadying breath. After she died, it hurt too much. Dancing was our connection. When she was gone, dance just reminded me of everything I'd lost. The old pianist nodded solemnly. Grief takes different forms for all of us. He gently pushed a photograph toward her. but your mother's legacy deserves to be remembered. Emma looked down at the image, her mother in full costume as Odette from Swan Lake, back arched impossibly, arms extended with ethereal grace. Despite the years of avoidance, a small smile formed on Emma's lips. This was her favorite role, she said softly. Yes, she performed it 27 times across 12 countries. Mr. Abernathy's eyes shone with memories. The Paris performance received a 15-minute standing ovation. For the next hour, Emma found herself immersed in stories of her mother's career. Some she remembered, others new to her. Mr. Abernathy had preserved not just photographs but reviews, programs, even handwritten notes from her mother. She was preparing you to follow her, wasn't she? He asked gently, showing Emma a photo of herself at 14, practicing at the bar while Marguerite watched proudly. She believed I could surpass her. Emma traced her mother's face in the photo. The acceptance to the Royal Academy was everything we'd worked for. And then the accident. Mr. Abernathy's voice dropped. 3 days later, wasn't it? Emma nodded, throat tight. Drunk driver. She was coming home from celebrating my acceptance. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the tragedy hanging between them. Why did you bring these to me now? Emma finally asked. Mr. Abernathy straightened in his chair. Because I saw you dance. After 6 years of hiding your gift, you danced again, and brilliantly. Your mother would have been so proud. It was one dance. It was a revelation. The old man leaned forward earnestly. The National Ballet is performing a tribute to your mother next season. They're recreating her most famous roles. Emma felt her chest constrict. I didn't know. They've been looking for you. They want you to perform her signature variation from Firebird. No. The response came automatically, panic flaring. I can't. But my dear, after seeing you dance with Don Romano, that was different. It was. Emma struggled to explain. It was anger, defiance. I wasn't thinking about technique or audience. I just reacted. Sometimes that's when we're most authentic. Mr. Abernathy covered her hand with his. Your mother always said technique without emotion is just exercise. Before she could respond, the door opened. Antonio Romano entered, his presence immediately filling the room. Forgive the interruption, he said smoothly. I wanted to ensure everything was satisfactory. Mr. Abernathy beamed. Most generous of you, Don Romano. We've had a wonderful conversation about Marguerite's legacy. Antonio's eyes found Emma's, reading her discomfort instantly. And is Miss Sullivan equally pleased with the reunion? It's been illuminating, she managed, trying to communicate her mixed emotions with her eyes. Understanding flashed across Antonio's face. Mr. Abernathy, might I borrow Emma for a moment? Hotel business. The old pianist waved them away. Of course, of course. I'll organize these programs chronologically while you're gone. Antonio held the door for Emma, guiding her into the hallway with a light touch to her lower back. You looked like you needed rescue, he said once the door closed. Emma leaned against the wall, exhaling heavily. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. His dark eyes studied her face. Too many memories? He wants me to perform in a tribute to my mother, at the National Ballet. Antonio's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. And you don't want to? I haven't danced professionally in 6 years. That's not what I asked. Emma looked up at him, startled by his perception. No one had challenged her this way since her mother died. I'm scared, she admitted, the truth surprising even herself. What if I can't do it? What if I freeze again? What if I ruin her legacy? Antonio stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. What if you don't try and spend the rest of your life wondering? That's not fair. Life rarely is. His voice softened. But you already know you can dance again. You proved it with me. Emma shook her head. That was different. Why? Because you were angry? Because I challenged you? Antonio's intensity matched her own. Then use that. Dance angry. Dance to prove everyone wrong. Dance to honor her in your own way, not just as her duplicate. His words struck something deep inside her. For years, she'd viewed dance only through the prism of her mother's expectations: perfection, dedication, legacy. She'd never considered dancing for herself, on her own terms. "Why do you care?" she asked, genuinely curious. "You barely know me." Antonio considered the question seriously. "I recognize something in you. Potential being wasted. A passion denied." He paused. "I know what it's like to have your path chosen by circumstances rather than choice." The parallel between them, her path derailed by death, his by duty, hung in the air between them. "I should get back," she said finally. "He brought all these memories of my mother. I can't just walk out." Antonio nodded. "Of course." As she turned to go, he added, "Emma." She paused, looking back at him. "Whatever you decide about the performance, make it your choice, not your mother's legacy, not this pianist's expectations, yours." Emma spent the next 3 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Abernathy had convinced the National Ballet to give her a chance at the Firebird variation, with the condition that she begin training immediately. Every morning before her cafe shift, she practiced at the community center studio, muscles screaming as they reawakened to the discipline they'd once known so well. She hadn't seen Antonio since their conversation in the hotel hallway, though evidence of his influence appeared in unexpected ways. New mirrors installed at the community center, an anonymous donation for proper flooring, a renowned ballet instructor who happened to volunteer her services for the children's program and stayed to give Emma private coaching. "Your technique is still there," the instructor, Madame Levine, told her after a particularly grueling session, "but you're holding back emotionally." "I know," Emma admitted, toweling sweat from her face. 6 years of keeping her emotions tightly controlled couldn't be undone in 3 weeks. "Think of what angered you that night at the gala," Madame suggested. "Use it." Emma nodded, though it wasn't anger she felt when thinking of that night anymore. It was something more complicated. A recognition of how Antonio's challenge had awakened something she thought was dead forever. On Friday night, just 1 week before the tribute performance, Emma returned to her apartment to find an elegant envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note in bold, masculine script. "Emma, I've respected your space, but I'd like to see how your preparation is progressing. The car will be waiting tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you're willing. Antonio." She stared at the note, torn between caution and a desire to see him again that she couldn't quite explain. In the end, curiosity won. The next morning, she found a sleek black car idling outside her building. The driver opened the door without speaking, revealing Antonio in the back seat. "You came?" he said, genuine pleasure warming his voice. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look even more dangerous. "I was curious," she replied, sliding into the seat beside him. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you can dance without constraints." He handed her a small paper bag. "Coffee. Black, 2 sugars. How you make it for yourself at the cafe." Emma accepted the coffee, surprised he'd noticed such a detail. "How would you know that?" A small smile played at his lips. "I notice everything about you." The car took them to an unassuming building on the outskirts of the theater district. Antonio led her through a side entrance and up a flight of stairs that opened into a stunning private dance studio. Perfect sprung floors, mirrored walls, even a small raised platform where musicians could sit. "What is this place?" Emma asked, taking in the beautiful space. "It belonged to a choreographer who owed me a favor." Antonio walked to the center of the room. "It's yours until the performance, day or night, whenever you need to practice." Emma ran her hand along the bar, emotion tightening her throat. "Why are you doing all this?" Antonio studied her for a long moment. Because I want to see you dance again. Not just the tango we shared, but the ballet that's in your blood. I might fail spectacularly. You might, but I don't think you will. He moved toward a sound system built into the wall. Show me what you've been working on. Emma hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. She was wearing simple practice clothes, black leggings and a loose sweater over a leotard, not the elegant evening dress she'd worn when they'd danced before. I'm not performance ready. I'm not asking for perfection. Antonio crossed his arms, challenge in his stance. I'm asking to see what you're afraid of. The blunt assessment hit home. Emma took a deep breath, kicking off her street shoes and pulling her hair into a quick bun. She handed Antonio her phone, open to the music for the Firebird variation. Just don't expect too much, she warned, moving to the center of the floor. Antonio said nothing, simply pressing play. The first haunting notes of Stravinsky filled the space, and Emma closed her eyes, letting the familiar choreography take over. For the first minute, she danced technically well but cautiously, marking some of the more difficult moves, holding back emotionally. Antonio watched silently, his expression unreadable. Halfway through, she faltered on a series of quick turns, losing momentum. Frustration and embarrassment flooded her, and she stopped, dropping her arms. I can't do this. Antonio stepped forward. Yes, you can. His voice was firm but not unkind. You're dancing like you're afraid of the music, like you're afraid of yourself. I haven't done this in 6 years. That's not the problem. He moved closer, circling her with calculated steps that reminded her of their tango. You danced perfectly with me that night. What's different now? Emma shook her head, unable to articulate the knot of emotions in her chest. Antonio stopped directly in front of her. Dance like you're angry with me again. I'm not angry with you. Pretend. His voice dropped lower. Remember how I pulled you onto that dance floor? How I mocked you in front of everyone? How I proposed marriage as a joke? Emma felt her pulse quickening, but not with anger. That night you danced to prove me wrong, Antonio continued. So prove me wrong now. Show me the dancer your mother believed could surpass her. Something in his words struck a nerve, not because he was trying to make her angry, but because he understood exactly what she needed. Play it again, she said quietly. From the beginning. This time, when the music started, Emma didn't hold back. She channeled everything, her grief over her mother, her fear of failure, her complicated feelings for the dangerous man watching her, into the movements. Where the choreography called for delicate fluttering, she made her arms sharp and defiant. Where it demanded precision, she added raw emotion. It wasn't a technically perfect rendition. She wobbled on one landing and simplified a jump. But it was honest in a way her dancing hadn't been since her mother died. When the music ended, Emma stood breathing heavily in the center of the floor. Antonio hadn't moved, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. That, he said softly, was Firebird. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression immediately hardening. I need to take this, he said, all warmth vanishing from his tone. Keep practicing. I'll be back. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Even through the solid wood, Emma could hear the commanding tone he used with whoever was on the other end of the line. She continued practicing while he was gone, losing herself in the music, making the choreography her own. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened again. When Antonio returned, his expression was grim. What's wrong? Emma asked, immediately sensing the tension in his powerful frame. Nothing for you to worry about. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Business. The word hung between them, a stark reminder of who he was and what he did. Emma suddenly felt foolish for forgetting, even momentarily. I should go, she said, reaching for her bag. Emma, Antonio began, but was interrupted by another buzz from his phone. He glanced at it and swore under his breath. I need to handle this. My driver will take you home. What's happening? A chill ran down Emma's spine. Antonio hesitated, clearly weighing how much to tell her. The Calabrese family is making threats, he finally said. Nothing I can't handle, but I need to focus on it now. The Calabrese family? Emma repeated. Like rival mafia? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Something like that. Please let my driver take you home. I'll call you later. He escorted her downstairs to the waiting car, his hand protective on her lower back. Before she got in, he caught her arm gently. You danced beautifully today, he said, his voice softening. Like you were finally free. Emma looked up at him, struck by the contradiction of this man, capable of tenderness and violence in equal measure. Thank you for the studio. It's yours for as long as you need it. He stepped back, the mask of Don Romano sliding back into place as another black car pulled up behind them. Be safe, Emma. As her car pulled away, Emma glanced back to see Antonio climbing into the second vehicle, flanked by two large men who hadn't been there when they arrived. His expression was cold, focused, nothing like the man who had watched her dance with such appreciation minutes before. She spent the evening practicing in her small apartment, pushing furniture aside to make room for basic movements. Around midnight, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Were you sleeping? Antonio's voice was low, tired. No. Still practicing. She sat on the edge of her bed. Is everything okay? A long pause. It will be. Another pause. I wanted to hear your voice. The simple admission sent warmth spreading through her chest. Are you in danger? Nothing I haven't handled before. His tone suggested he was choosing his words carefully. But it means I can't see you for a few days. Not until this is resolved. I understand. Emma twisted the phone cord around her finger. The tribute performance is in 6 days. I know, I'll be there. The conviction in his voice left no room for doubt. Nothing could keep me away. Even rival families? She tried to keep her tone light. Not even them. Something shifted in his voice. Emma, He stopped. Be careful this week. Stay in public places. If anything feels wrong, call the number I texted you earlier. My men will come immediately. The warning sent a chill through her. You're scaring me. Good. A little fear keeps you safe. His voice gentled. But don't worry too much. I would never let anything happen to you. After they hung up, Emma found herself unable to sleep, her mind filled with images of Antonio, the way he watched her dance, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of keeping her safe, the glimpse of the ruthless Don he became when duty called. She told herself she was being foolish. Whatever she felt for Antonio Romano was complicated by gratitude and the high emotions of returning to dance. He was dangerous, not just to her physical safety, but to her heart. Getting involved with him would mean accepting a world she'd always avoided. Yet when she finally drifted to sleep, it was his voice she heard in her dreams, urging her to dance without fear. The next 5 days passed in a blur of rehearsals. Emma practically lived at the private studio Antonio had provided, working with Madame Levine and occasionally Mr. Abernathy at the piano. She hadn't heard from Antonio since their late-night call, though she sometimes sensed she was being watched when leaving the studio late at night. On Wednesday, 2 days before the performance, she arrived at the studio to find an elegant box waiting inside the door. Inside was a costume, a modernized version of the traditional Firebird design with shimmering red and gold fabric that caught the light like actual flames. The note read simply, "For your debut, fly free, A." Emma ran her fingers over the exquisite craftsmanship, tears pricking her eyes. The costume must have cost thousands, and it was perfectly sized for her. She tried it on immediately, gasping at how it transformed her reflection in the mirrors. That afternoon, she performed a full run-through for Madame Levine, wearing the costume to get accustomed to its movement. Magnificent, the older woman declared when Emma finished. "You've found the fire inside you again." "Do you think I'm ready?" Emma asked, still unsure despite weeks of intensive training. Madame Levine smiled enigmatically. "I think you're finally dancing for yourself, not for your mother's ghost. That makes all the difference." The night before the performance, Emma found herself too nervous to sleep. She slipped out of her apartment at midnight and took a taxi to the studio, needing to work through her anxiety with movement. She was so absorbed in practice that she didn't immediately notice the studio door opening. When she spun toward the mirror, she caught sight of Antonio standing silently in the doorway, watching her with naked admiration on his face. Emma stopped abruptly, heart hammering. "You scared me. I'm sorry." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "The security system alerted me that someone was here." He looked different, tired, with shadows under his eyes and a fresh cut along his jawline. He'd changed from the jeans and sweater she'd last seen him in to an immaculate black suit, though his tie was loosened and his collar unbuttoned. "You look exhausted," she said, grabbing a towel to blot the sweat from her face. Antonio shrugged. "Long few days." "Is it? Resolved? The business?" His expression hardened momentarily. "Yes, permanently." Emma didn't ask what that meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Thank you for the costume," she said instead. "It's beautiful. I'm glad you like it." Antonio moved further into the room, stopping a respectful distance from her. "I'd hoped to see you in it. It's at my apartment. I didn't want to risk damaging it before tomorrow." He nodded, then gestured to the floor. "Don't let me interrupt your practice." "I was just finishing." Emma shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of her sweaty practice clothes and messy hair. "It's late. You're nervous about tomorrow." It wasn't a question. "Terrified," she admitted. "You'll be magnificent." The simple confidence in his voice steadied her. "How do you know?" Antonio took a step closer. "Because I've seen who you really are when you dance. Not Marguerite Sullivan's daughter. Not a waitress. Just Emma. Fierce and free and completely alive." As she looked up at him, struck by how well he seemed to understand her despite their brief acquaintance. "I've missed you," she confessed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, followed by a warmth that transformed his tired features. "I've missed you too, more than I should." The admission hung between them, charged with possibilities. Emma felt herself drawn toward him, the invisible barrier she'd maintained between them weakening. "Antonio," she began, not sure what she meant to say. He closed the distance between them with a single step, his hand coming up to cradle her face with surprising gentleness. "Emma," he murmured, "I've tried to stay away, to protect you from my world, but I can't stop thinking about you." Emma's heart thundered in her chest. "Your world is dangerous." "Yes, I could get hurt. I would do everything in my power to prevent that." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I can't promise absolute safety." That would be a lie. His honesty touched her more deeply than any flowery promises could have. Emma reached up, her fingers brushing against the cut on his jaw. "What happened?" "Nothing important." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers down her spine. "What matters is that it's over and I'm here." "For how long?" "As long as you'll have me." The vulnerability in his voice was startling from a man who commanded such power. Emma knew she should pull away. This man lived in a world of violence and secrets, everything she'd spent years avoiding. Yet when he looked at her like this, she couldn't remember why that mattered. Slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, Antonio lowered his head until his lips hovered just above hers. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. Instead, Emma closed the final distance between them. The kiss began gently, almost reverently, but quickly deepened as months of tension and attraction ignited between them. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against the solid warmth of his chest. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the power contained in his frame. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Antonio rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you watching me across that ballroom." Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Even before I humiliated you with my dancing?" He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Especially after that." His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the moment. Antonio sighed, reluctantly stepping back to check it. "Duty calls?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. "Unfortunately." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I need to go, but I'll be at the performance tomorrow night. Front row, center. I'll be looking for you." Antonio cupped her face again, his expression growing serious. "Dance for yourself tomorrow, Emma. Not for your mother's memory, not for the audience, and certainly not for me. Dance because it brings you joy." She nodded, touched by his understanding. "I will." He kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable promise, before stepping away. "Let my driver take you home. It's late, and you need rest before tomorrow." As they walked to the waiting car, Antonio's arm protective around her shoulders, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. Whatever happened at the performance tomorrow, whatever complications might come from allowing this dangerous man into her life, she knew she was finally making choices for herself, not out of fear or obligation or grief. The night of the performance arrived with a flurry of activity backstage at the National Ballet. Emma stood in the wings, wearing Antonio's gift, the Firebird costume that gleamed like actual flames under the stage lights. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "5 minutes, Miss Sullivan," a stagehand whispered. Emma nodded, unable to speak through her nerves. The theater was sold out, the tribute to her mother drawing ballet aficionados from across the country. She'd deliberately avoided looking out at the audience during rehearsal that afternoon, afraid the sight of all those expectant faces would paralyze her. "You're ready," Madame Levine said, appearing beside her. The older woman straightened Emma's costume with practiced hands. "Remember, technique serves emotion, not the other way around." "What if I forget the steps?" Emma whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "Your body remembers," Madame assured her. "Trust it." The variation before hers, a piece from Swan Lake, ended to enthusiastic applause. As the dancer took her bows, Emma forced herself to peek through the curtain, her eyes immediately finding Antonio in the front row, exactly where he'd promised to be. He sat straight-backed and elegant in a tuxedo, his dark eyes focused intently on the stage. Even in a theater full of wealthy patrons, he emanated an aura of power that set him apart. As if sensing her gaze, he turned slightly toward the wings, a small smile touching his lips. Seeing him steadied her. Whatever happened in the next 5 minutes, she would survive it. She had survived grief and loss and rediscovered her passion. She could face this. "Places," the stage manager whispered. Emma moved to her mark in the darkness as the previous dancer exited. The announcer's voice echoed through the theater. "Our next performance is the Firebird Variation, originally made famous by Marguerite Sullivan, and tonight performed by her daughter, Emma Sullivan, in her return to the stage after 6 years." A murmur ran through the audience. Emma closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made her choice. Tonight, she would dance for herself. The music began, and the spotlight found her. "Breathtaking," the critic from the Arts Review had written. "Sullivan doesn't merely dance the Firebird, she embodies it." Her technique, remarkably preserved after years away from the stage, serves a raw emotional quality that her famous mother, for all her perfection, never quite achieved. Emma smiled as she reread the review for perhaps the 100th time, still not quite believing the events of the past 2 months. The tribute performance had led to offers from 3 different ballet companies, including the coveted position at the National Ballet that Mr. Abernathy had mentioned. She sat now in her small apartment, soon to be her former apartment, as she'd given notice last week. Her few possessions were mostly packed in boxes, ready for the move to her new place closer to the theater district. A place, interestingly, that belonged to Antonio. "It's an investment property," he'd explained when offering it. "Sitting empty most of the time. You'd be doing me a favor by living there during your season with the company." They both knew it was an excuse, a way to keep her close while maintaining her independence. Emma had accepted with the condition that she pay a fair rent, a compromise that had made Antonio smile in that particular way that crinkled the corners of his eyes. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Antonio holding a single red rose and a bottle of champagne. "Ready to celebrate?" he asked, leaning down to kiss her briefly. Emma accepted both gifts, drawing him inside. "You're early." Meeting finished sooner than expected. He didn't offer details, and she didn't ask. They had established boundaries over the past weeks. His business remained largely separate from their relationship, though she knew he was making changes, shifting toward more legitimate enterprises. Antonio loosened his tie and settled onto her small sofa, looking paradoxically at ease in the modest surroundings. "Have you told the cafe you're leaving yet?" "Yesterday." Emma poured champagne into the only 2 wine glasses she owned. "Sophia cried, then made me promise to bring you by for coffee before we go." "She likes me," Antonio said with a hint of smugness. "She thinks you're dangerous and sexy," Emma corrected, handing him a glass. "Not entirely wrong on either count." He smiled, pulling her down beside him. "I have news." "Good or bad?" "Good, I think." He took a sip of champagne. "The architectural firm approved my investment. They're breaking ground on the Community Arts Center next month." Emma's face lit up. "Antonio, that's wonderful." The Community Arts Center had been his idea, a state-of-the-art facility in one of the city's underserved neighborhoods, offering dance, music, and visual arts programs to children who couldn't otherwise afford them. It was the first major project of his new legitimate business venture, Romano Development. "They're naming the dance studio after your mother," he added quietly. "If that's okay with you?" Tears pricked at Emma's eyes. She would have loved that. Antonio set his glass down, turning to face her fully. "There's something else we should discuss, about the future." Emma felt her heart skip a beat at his serious tone. "What is it?" He took her hands in his expression unusually vulnerable. "These past weeks with you have been transformative. You've shown me a life I didn't think was possible for someone like me." "Antonio." "Let me finish," he said gently. "I know my world still frightens you. I know there are parts of my business, my family obligations, that you don't fully understand or approve of." She nodded, unable to deny it. "I'm working to change that, to build something legitimate, something that honors what I once wanted to be, rather than what circumstances made me." His dark eyes held hers intently. "But it's a slow process. There will always be aspects of my past that follow me." "I know," Emma said softly. "I've accepted that." Antonio squeezed her hands. "Have you? Truly? Because I need to know if you can see a future where our worlds aren't separate, where you're not just part of my private life, but standing beside me publicly, as my wife." Emma's breath caught. Though they hadn't spoken directly of marriage, she'd sensed they were moving in that direction. Still, hearing the word aloud made it suddenly, thrillingly real. "Are you proposing to me, Don Romano?" she asked, her voice light though her heart raced. A smile tugged at his lips. "Not quite yet. I'm asking if you're open to the possibility." Emma considered his question seriously. The past 2 months had shown her a different side of Antonio, still powerful and occasionally intimidating, but also capable of genuine tenderness and surprising vulnerability. He had supported her return to dance without trying to control it, had encouraged her to forge her own path rather than follow her mother's. "I'm more than open to it," she said finally. "I'm hoping for it." The tension in his shoulders eased visibly. "Even knowing who I am? What I've done?" I'm in love with who you are, Emma said, the words coming easily now that she'd decided to speak them. Not who you were or what you've done. Antonio's expression transformed, joy and wonder replacing uncertainty. Say that again. I'm in love with you, she repeated, smiling as his arms encircled her waist. I love you, Emma Sullivan, he murmured against her hair. More than I thought possible. She leaned back to look at him, tracing the strong line of his jaw with her fingertips. Promise me something? Anything. No matter what happens with your business or my career, we keep dancing together, even when we're old and gray. Antonio laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I promise. He pulled her closer, his expression growing serious again. You know, that night at the gala, when I made that ridiculous proposal, I never imagined it would lead us here. You promised to marry me if I danced with you, Emma reminded him teasingly. A man of your word would follow through. His eyes darkened with desire, and something deeper. Careful what you wish for, Emma. I meant what I said that night, even if it started as a joke. And I meant what I said just now, she replied, sliding her arms around his neck. I love you, Antonio Romano. Your world doesn't frighten me anymore, at least not enough to keep me away from you. As he lowered his mouth to hers, Emma reflected on the strange path that had led them here. A public challenge, a defiant dance, a past revealed and a passion rekindled. What had begun as humiliation had transformed into the greatest gift of her life. Not just the return to dance, but the discovery that love could be found in the most unexpected places, even between a mafia boss and a dancer who had once hidden from her own talent. The future wouldn't be without challenges. Antonio's world would always contain elements of danger. Her career would demand sacrifices from both of them. But in his arms, with the promise of partnership before them, Emma felt certain of one thing. They would face whatever came next together, step by perfect step, in a dance entirely their own.